Good afternoon, good evening, good morning from wherever you're joining. This is Filippo Veglio with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Delighted to welcome you on this virtual conference, virtual event focused on the future of work. As you see here, the title, Shaping the Future of Work by Putting People First. Delighted to do this a second time today. We had a session in the European morning a few hours ago, and it went very well with a number of interesting perspectives and speakers. Some of them, I welcome them back with us this afternoon, European time, and a number of them new speakers. Warm welcome to them, and thank you very much for your agreeing to share your perspectives. The host today, I have the pleasure of being joined as a co-host by my colleague Davide Fiedler, manager of the social impact area and in charge of the future of work outputs that we are sharing with you today. And from my side, delighted to be part of the team and supporting the team in their endeavors today and of course throughout the year, together with members and partners from all across the world. As I mentioned before, a number of interesting speakers among us this afternoon in Geneva time, as we're dialing in from Geneva, Davide and myself. We've got Davide on the next slide. A great lineup with Brenda Trenoden from PwC UK as a partner, Juliet Stuttard, Director of People and Organization at PwC as well. Jessica Hyde, welcome back, Jessica. You were with us this morning from Accenture and Global Corporate Citizenship Strategy Lead there. Sonja van Lieshout, welcome back as well to you as Global Public Affairs Manager at Randstad. Cristina Soto Rubio, welcome back to you as well. Santander Strategy Human Resources. From Sonai, dialing in from Portugal. Mafalda Lobo Xavier, Area Manager and Employer Brand. Welcome back. Mel, also to you, welcome back from Fujitsu as Fujitsu Representative and Director of Interregional Engagement Sustainability Unit. Good morning to Julie Zanker, Senior Director for Global Affairs at Microsoft, one of our companies headquartered out of the US. Very warm welcome to our 8 speakers, a lot of them for 90 minutes, and looking forward to all of you sharing your thoughts and perspectives. Allow me only a few minutes of introduction, in particular because it's also a meeting that we have opened up as part of our virtual event series, opened up to stakeholders, contacts, partners from outside of the WBCSD. WBCSD in a nutshell, a group, an alliance or coalition of 200 like-minded companies believing and strongly engaged around the business value, the business case of sustainability, linking sustainability to business success, to business resilience, to business innovation, and all sorts of elements that strengthen the business license to operate, to innovate, and to grow, underpinned by a belief in leadership and guided by a vision of a world by the middle of the century in which 9+ billion people live well within the boundaries of the planet. On the next slide, Davide, very warm welcome to our member company representatives joining us on the call. We have about 40 participants today. Several of you are representatives of member companies. You see them reflected here in this logo slide. About 40+ headquarter countries, if we take sort of the headquarter location of our members, and about 20 industry sectors represented in this membership. So very warm welcome to you in the membership, and of course to our partners and other contacts and stakeholders from across the world. WBCSD, very briefly, and this is the only slide I'll continue to show you, is built, the work program, the activities of WBCSD are all built around the 6 programs that you see outlined here, guided by the belief in system transformation and guided by the belief that there are ample opportunities for companies to shape the systems in line with sustainability principles and requirements. So the circularity agenda, the urban infrastructure agenda, of course the climate and energy agenda, and the ecosystems, food and nature agenda, the people agenda, where of course future of work is strongly embedded, and the agenda around sustainable capitalism shaped around what we call the redefining value program. So these are the 6 system transformations that WBCSD is advancing together with its members and partners. And for anyone interested in knowing more, there is a lot more information, of course, in different platforms, of course, first and foremost through our website, where you can find any possible level of information with more detail. The agenda for this afternoon is packed but stimulating. Let me assure you of that. Of course, thanks to our speakers, a little bit of setting the scene from my end before we really dive into the interesting parts, let's say the key parts of the session, COVID-19 and how it is shaping work, the present but also the future of work, how our member companies, in this particular case, 4 of them, putting people at the heart of the future of work. How are we also working together with members to develop outputs, tools, methodologies, practical solutions, and for that we will have a section, the 4th section here outlined on the agenda, around the launch of the so-called business principles for people-centered technology transformation. We'll have a couple of our colleagues commenting and building on those principles. And then we'll do a brief wrap-up at the bottom of the next hour. Allow me, before we get started, to just do a couple of housekeeping slides. For those who have joined other meetings, they will sound very familiar, and forgive me for having to repeat it again and again, but it's just for the safety and well-being, let's say, of everybody on the calls. We are muting participants, all the while recording the sessions, and of course making slides and the recordings available following the sessions of today. And in terms of the interactivity, we want to build as much of it as possible. We will use the Mentimeter tool in a few minutes time, but if you want to exchange thoughts or provide inputs or introduce questions, please use the chat function and or the raising the hand function that is also available in the Zoom interface. So please don't hesitate to do that. And last housekeeping item is the antitrust statement reminder. This is again a traditional slide in the World Business Council setting. Please, if I could kindly ask you to refrain and to avoid any sort of discussion or conversation around some of competitive sensitive issues, such as the ones that you see outlined here, the handful which go from pricing and cost to bid strategies, to additions or reductions in terms of capacity in the future, to customers issues, to output decision issues. We appreciate your understanding. It's just part of WCSD governance so that meetings run smoothly and without any issues being thrown up around antitrust issues. David, the next slide, please, to just provide a couple of minutes of introduction on future of work. We're not here to discuss the details of the Future of Work project of WBCSD, but we are very grateful to all of the members, the 23 member companies that you see outlined on the next slide, Davide, that you see outlined here, to the 23 members and to the 7 partner organizations of WBCSD engaged in this particular work for the past 18 months, driving the work and building collaborative approaches to this very challenging topic for companies and society alike, in terms of the positioning of companies, in terms of the thinking, the methodologies, the tools, and the approaches. How can we nurture collaboration and cross-sector exchanges and the development of joint solutions, such as the principles that we are launching today. The work of the World Business Council is guided by the vision around the future of work, which you see outlined here in pink. The vision outlining as people work to thrive personally, professionally, and as active members of society. This vision is embedded in 4 strong pillars, the pillars of security, the pillars of empowerment, of purpose, and overall well-being. And they point to specific needs for collaboration and for action, and for engagement around particularly the workforce, the translation of a vision and principles into businesses, the engagement around labor markets, and of course, the realities around social support mechanisms for workers all across the world. For anyone who is interested in more, you can find via the link below a lot more information, an excellent web-based overview, not only on the project, but actually on the content itself of Future of Work, studies, data, news items, etc., etc. Everything is available there. The vision is backed also personally through personal leadership of our council members, the highest level representatives of our member companies in the council itself. We're very pleased to have 13 of them who have kindly agreed to support a future of work leadership statement, which calls for businesses to collaborate, for businesses to put people at the heart, at the center of everyday decisions, including on the application of technology, as we will hear later today. And delighted to have a number of them represented here today as companies through their liaison delegates. I'm delighted to have also almost half of them in the WBCSD Executive Committee, so that we have really a relay between leadership and the overall work of the Council, given the cross-cutting nature of future of work across the areas of energy, circularity, urban infrastructure, etc., etc. So with that said, I hope I wasn't too long, Davide, but I'm handing over to the first part of our agenda, the first core part of our agenda, which relates to COVID-19 and the future of work. And for that, I'm very pleased to hand over to our colleagues of PwC, Brenda Trinoden and Juliette Stuttert. I hand over to you both the microphone and the word, and looking forward to your perspectives in this keynote for the next 20 minutes or so. Davide, did I miss something that we have a Mentimeter up front?
So yes, we have a Mentimeter up front.
Oh, that wasn't showing in my PDF. I'm sorry.
But we'll leave it to Juliet. We'll leave it to Juliet and Brenda here. So if you please go to menti.com, either on your phone or another, open up another tab on your browser, and use the code 757013. That is the code. I'm pretty sure usually we see it also. You will also see it in the chat. And Juliet, I'll hand over to you for the question.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really nice to see you all today. I contribute to the Future of Work work stream. I'm delighted to present alongside Brenda today. So I'm a director in people and organisation in PwC, and I work with a range of clients across public and private sector. And we've been really busy. And what we'd like to give you today is just an overview of some of the really great things our clients are doing, to hopefully give you some inspiration, some practical thoughts and ideas that you can take to your own organisations and make happen. So Brenda, just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Brenda Trinoden. I'm a partner in the People in Organisation practice, and I lead on inclusive culture, diversity and purpose. I joined last year, and I also have a side hustle as global co-chair of the 30% Club, which is a global campaign to have better gender balance at the top of organizations and now throughout organizations. Thanks, Juliette.
Great, okay. So we're going to talk about 3 areas, and whilst you're thinking about some of the key challenges, hopefully we'll cover some of them today. We're going to talk about 3 areas. One is workforce planning, that I know we're going to come to later on in the event, as in terms of short-term workforce planning to longer term. We're going to cover mental health and technology, and that's come up on the screen actually, lots of words around communication, isolation there. And lastly, we're going to think about diversity and inclusion. So we're going to cover those 3 topics. Hopefully between us, we'll give a good debate and some different views. Brenda and I work across different parts of the sectors in the UK, so just from our perspectives really. So I was just going to kick off by giving my thoughts on workforce planning. I guess I think everyone would recognise it was actually easier to lock people down than it is to bring people back to work. And I think a lot of people are going, that was hard, but actually dealing with almost a 3D landscape around workforce planning. So you've not just got to look at demand and supply and new demand from your customers, and that supply being your workforce in terms of its COVID status. But you've also got environmental factors like office space, PPE equipment to really add that complexity that we've never had before. So I guess from my perspective, many of the greater organisations are really looking at supply and demand, not just in the shorter term, but they're looking at the longer term. And many are really thinking about those people in the front office, how they're going to manage them, what's the demand. So great HR teams are working with their business leaders to say, what's your new demand from your customers? How does it alter in your front office? And how do we equip our staff and our people to feel protected and safe in that front office environment? In the middle office, where you're enabling your, I guess, your front of house, whatever that may be, it's saying, okay, how does that interaction work? How does collaboration work now? And who do we need on site versus who do we need off site? How do we get those to work together? And back office would look very different now. A lot of organizations, even our own, is really thinking, well, actually, does back office really need to be in any environment now at all? Does office mean anything for an enabling proposition? How do we make sure that we take the best of what we've learned from lockdown and really bake it, hardwire it into our front, middle and back office to make us work more efficiently? So I think it is that thing about true and accurate data, working with your business leaders to understand the new normal in terms of their demand for skills and how your organization might change over time. The other thing is, obviously, we might have a second wave, hopefully not, but we might do. So many HR teams are gearing themselves up for what does that look like and how will my impacted population be affected again, and how can I limit that risk to the organisation? So that's just my perspective. Brenda, your thoughts?
So I would always say that it's really important to put an inclusion lens on all decisions that are happening at the moment. You know, all those things that Juliet was just talking about, and the planning that goes in and things. We need to make sure that there are no unintended consequences for particular groups. And also actually a purpose lens to ensure that some of these short-term, urgent and crisis-led decisions are aligned to and consistent with your purpose and your strategy. You know, afterwards, after the crisis is over, after the short-term piece, people will judge you as an organization on how you responded in the crisis. Was it consistent with what you stated your organization is there to do, what you're about, and how you go about doing things? Was it consistent with your values? And, you know, were your decisions, even if tough, were they fair? You know, a number of leaders that I speak to have said, you know, they took decisions quickly and who they were going to furlough, who they weren't going to furlough. And then afterwards, they started having people have furlough envy. And, you know, and they found that, you know, colleagues that were furloughed were maybe those that weren't, felt the ones that were kind of having it easy, putting their feet up and getting paid. And so, you know, they hadn't done enough communicating about why they took the decisions they took, why some people were furloughed and others weren't. Some companies thinking about, you know, that they had to make redundancies. They couldn't go furlough and then wait. And so, you know, really the ones that have come out quite well are ones that thought about how did they support those people they had to make redundant? How did they announce those decisions? You know, were you a company that told people on a Zoom call they were all being made redundant? Or did you put more thought into it? You know, not everyone can afford, like Airbnb, to have given everyone a laptop when they made them redundant and give them, you know, career planning. But there are ways that you can go about doing it and explaining it that will reflect well in the long term and you know, continue to make you a sustainable businesses. You're thinking about, you know, which areas you shut down and why, and even, you know, as you come up and you think about this new demand that Juliet is talking about, how do you allocate these projects and this work? You know, have you thought about the fairness of that? Or do you just turn to people without considering it? So putting those lenses over those decisions, you know, are really, really important. And I would say, you know, you can look at what are the risks of not doing it, not having someone think about it. Well, clearly there are huge reputational risks, you know, with all of your different stakeholders, be they customers, be they staff, you know, investors, etc. But actually, I would always say, what's the opportunity in doing it? You know, what's the benefit? And the opportunity comes back to customers, you know, being loyal and wanting to stick with you, you know, how you're viewed in civil society and continue to have a social license to operate, brand, reputation, future hiring, and long-term sustainability. So, you know, I would say that all of those things, as the plans are being put in place, you know, use the data and find someone who has the capacity to take that objective view and put those lenses over that planning that you're doing. Back to you, Juliet.
Yeah, no, I just reflecting, actually, a lot of organisations are now faced with bringing people back and are making some decisions that might have unintended consequences. For example, bringing somebody back in who's furloughed and thinking about their caring responsibilities and saying, okay, they might not want to come back, but actually that may be unfair. So again, some of the decisions that are being made with good heart you have to really think about objectively. So I think that's a really good lens on workforce planning. So the next area we thought we'd talk about was kind of mental health and technology. So I think, you know, mental health has been great. It's become common parlance in many organisations now, and talking about it, communicating about it, making sure you've got provision around your mental health. And I guess if we had our time again, thinking about COVID, we could have predicted some of the consequences of that in terms of mental health. So people feeling isolated, that came up on the word cloud just now. People feeling cut off, not being able to collaborate as effectively. I think Brenda and I, we discussed actually voices become quieter, you know, in terms of technology, making sure that everyone has a voice in a virtual world. But I guess in terms of mental health, there's two things that come to mind. As HR professionals, we're often challenged to give a huge range and breadth of offering around all mental health issues. And my sense, it goes back to almost the two things, which is getting people to feel safe. So how do you initiate, thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, how do you make people feel safe mentally? Because actually, if you don't make them feel safe mentally, you cannot go up from that. You can't have inspiration, you can't have people feeling empowered without having that safety first. So in your organisational context, what does that safe mean? And I'll give you an example that's probably not a common example, but safety about data. So a lot of people are working in a virtual environment, if they're working from home, with data that they don't normally have to work with if they're in an office environment. They feel protected and they've got supervisors on hand to help them with difficult conversations or difficult analysis. But actually, if you're doing that in your home environment, either having conversations that are confidential or data, you feel unprotected. So it's almost, how do you protect people's mental health and well-being? Not just the obvious implications of working virtually, but actually the unanticipated ones around safety and security and how people are feeling. And dealing with things like, so in social care, they obviously deal with customer calls that are very, very troublesome. And how do you get that security around having that conversation, having that data in somebody's home? So some of the health consequences of COVID are less obvious, but think about safety first, then work up from that and think about, okay, what else can I provide? If I've provided mental safety, how do I move up from that? So Brenda, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, there are so many different things to take into account, you know, about all of this. Some things that I've been hearing, and you know, I think everybody will have experienced this to some extent, but despite, you know, the technology, working from home not only leads to physical distance, but that psychological distance, you know, from your colleagues. And in some industries, that increases, you know, behavioral risk. Think about traders, you know, in some of the industries that are under a lot of pressure, making decisions, you know, to take on risk. And the normal control and support functions don't work as well, where your supervisors or your colleagues can't spot problems. You also don't have people around you that you can check things with, bounce ideas off with, you know, ask, you know, I'm thinking about this, I'm not sure. And when you have to email someone, it feels a bit more formal. So that really leads to increased stress, can lead to burnout. And once again, very hard as a supervisor to spot that. Whereas if you're in the same room, you could kind of see signs, you know, if you're distance, you can't. So, you know, you need to really think about the regular check-ins, you know, informal chat rooms, buddy systems, you know, do you have a kind of like an open chat every day that people can pop into? And actually, you know, we're trialing at PwC having wearables where you can, you know, monitor some people's, you know, vital statistics from a well-being standpoint. People voluntarily say, you know, we're happy for you to monitor that. So you could maybe, you know, see when you think someone's under stress. I think the other thing, and points to some of the things Juliet talked about, there's a real risk of people not taking into account the context in which others are working. So, you know, there are some people that maybe have less personal space at home. You know, I've seen people on calls that are working on an ironing board. You know, they haven't got, you know, a fantastic desk. And so, you know, not only are there ergonomic problems, but that creates, you know, personal stress, you know, thinking about your backdrop and have you set the scene and things. And you know, people will have caring responsibilities, they'll have relationship stresses, you know, in extreme cases, domestic violence or other serious personal issues. That can lead to people having, you know, making errors, not being as productive. And, you know, I hate it when I hear about people that are measuring and judging productivity at this time without being sensitive to all of those things and realizing that not everyone's in the same position. For those global companies I speak to, you know, of course, in different parts of the world, you know, you may not even have good power supply, let alone having, you know, a proper Wi-Fi connection or, you know, decent facility to work in, or maybe access to nutritious food. And, you know, resilience came up on one of the slides that we were talking about. The number of clients I've spoken to that have said, you know, we're really struggling to help people with resilience. You know, how do we do that? What are the tips about that? Or people I know that are outperformers that have said, you know, that they're feeling huge pressure because they're used to smashing it all the time and they don't feel they're smashing it right now. Well, guess what? You know, I don't think many people are smashing it. So all of those things, I think, you know, the companies that are really thinking about their people are taking that into account and being sensitive and providing not only support, but really considering, you know, how that impacts, you know, on the long term on their staff. Back to you, Juliet.
So yeah, that's really helpful. I'm conscious of time, and we were going to cover diversity and inclusion as our last one. But I guess before I do that, there's another mentee that just while we're thinking about the last one, just so we get some words up, is what so we've talked about the challenges. What's the biggest opportunities we think are in the workplace about COVID? How can we make the best of this? What do we see as the biggest opportunities that as HR professionals we can really focus on for the future? So it's diversity, so absolutely your area, Brenda, so go ahead.
Sure. So as you're putting your words up on the mentee, and you know, and I do really like thinking about this as an opportunity as opposed to a problem or a challenge. You know, I would just leave you with a few thoughts. You know, inclusion impacts the way a whole organization operates. You know, it draws on everyone's strengths, perspectives, you know, their different experiences to solve complex problems like those that we're all grappling with now. So now isn't the time to put that at the bottom of the agenda. I saw a survey recently of over 1,100 employers that was conducted in April, and only 2/5 of those employers thought that their prior investment in inclusion and diversity would help them respond effectively to the crisis, both for their employees and for their customer needs. You know, I think they're missing a trick. But, you know, inclusion doesn't just happen. It needs deliberate action. You know, it needs data, measurement, design, accountability, regular authentic communication from the top, role modeling of inclusive behaviors. And right now, you know, it's really important to put those lenses over things and think about how do we bring all of that inclusive talent that we have to bear on this really difficult situation. You know, if diversity is a necessary but not sufficient ingredient, inclusion is the secret sauce that really makes the winning recipe. So I just leave you with a couple of quick examples, and I'm conscious we're out of time, but one major food retailer had told me that the diversity of thought, their inclusive culture, and strong connection to purpose allowed them in the crisis to deliver what had been a 3.5-year plan for a business initiative in actually 6 weeks, because they were able to really bring everyone together and tap into all that talent, and everyone felt the purpose of feeding Britain. They're now looking at how they can capitalize on that collective superpower that they have and change going forward. They're changing how they do remote working from a long-term standpoint, you know, how they make sure that everyone's included in remote working, how they cater to different styles of how people work, different times of the day. They hired a lot more disabled people through the crisis because they changed how their hiring practice worked. And they're trying to look into that and understand that and really capitalize that as well. People are changing their benefits packages and things. And so, you know, I would just leave you with the tone from the top is critical. And, you know, once again, you know, diverse experiences, outlooks, and skills we know need to lead to better decision making, better ability to deal with what we're going through now. So, you know, really, without inclusion in all of this, diversity is an unfulfilled potential. So I'm keen to see, you know, all of these great things that are coming up in terms of opportunities. This is the chance. Never waste a good crisis. You know, look at how you can be bold and make big changes for the better for everyone going forward.
Thank you. I think that's us. Thank you very much for having us. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Brenda and Juliet. I'm just looking through the chat, but I don't see any questions, at least so far. We went through the Menti discussion. David, I don't see anything else. I think we invite everybody, of course, to use the chat function or to raise their hand. Maybe some things feed in a little bit later on, Brenda and Juliet. So we will keep that, of course, going and, of course, alert you to it. And normally everybody sees the chat, but we will be monitoring it closely. So thank you very much for those perspectives around those three issues around scenario planning of the workforce, diversity and inclusion, and of course, mental health and technology. Thank you so much for that. I am handing over to Davide now, who will take over for the 4 member perspectives from Randstad, Accenture, Sonai, and Santander to put people at the heart of the future of work. Davide, over to you.
Thank you, Filippo. I'm just seeing that Christina from Santander is having some technical issues, so we'll see how it plays out until we get to that point. But really, we wanted to share with you some inspiration for action, some based on some solutions, some experiences of our members, some of which we have collected over the past few months, and actually over the past 2 years as part of the project. We started off looking at the landscape of the future of work, at the debate, and we were observing a lot of talk, a lot of research going into what future of work may look like, but we didn't see much in terms of what the role of business could be, should be, or what companies were already doing in terms of improving how work is designed, how work is carried out. So what we started doing was collecting examples from our WBCSD member companies and started sharing them so that other companies in WBCSD, but also beyond our membership, could use this as, those case studies as inspiration for their own strategies, for their own action, for their decision making. We currently stand at 19 short one-page case studies and 7 deep dives that we've done so far. We continue growing this body of knowledge, this body of experiences, and you can see all of these on the website that you see here on the screen that Filippo mentioned already before as well. And we keep on updating them. And if you have examples from your own work, from your strategies that you would like to share, where you think that you are improving how work is designed, if you're addressing some of the challenges that Juliet and Brenda discussed, please reach out to us and share them with us. We'll be happy to work with you on sharing those experiences. And today we would like to share with you 4 experiences from Accenture, Santander, and Sonai. So with that, I would like to hand over to Jessica, being mindful that she has to leave soon. Jessica, please, you're there, yeah?
I am, yes. Thank you so much, David. And yeah, thank you to Brenda and Juliet for a really engaging session just now, really interesting. So I think my perspectives are coming at the inclusive future of work topic from a different angle. So thinking about my role as our corporate citizenship global strategy lead at Accenture. So thinking about how we can help wider society to navigate some of the changes in the future of work. So I'm going to talk through some of the research and projects that we had underway in this space already, and then some reflections on how that's evolving as a result of what's happening with coronavirus. So back in 2018, we published a call to action, so some insights and research on what we call the inclusive future of work, which was really looking at how experienced workers could navigate some of the changes in the digital economy. And so this was very much focused on a lot of ethnographic research globally, understanding where we thought some of the impacts were most likely to be, and really finding that those who were most likely to be at risk of being impacted by new technologies were also those who had the fewest resources to navigate those changes. So they might have less than degree level qualifications, lower financial security, lower job security, less access to training on the job, and yet their roles were most likely to be either completely replaced or significantly disrupted by technology that was being deployed. So So really, we then wanted to make this a positive conversation. There was a lot in the news at the time around what might the impacts be on workforces. So we wanted to shift that conversation into a positive space and think about what are the solutions that we might be able to put in place to address this challenge. And so the centre of this slide here is really looking at those 4 solution spaces that we created, and this was through a global design thinking network, bringing in subject matter experts from across our partner networks and within Accenture. So we created 4 solution spaces. The envision piece is really around helping individuals to build the confidence and have the vision to think about new careers. So for those individuals who have already been in the workplace and might to a certain extent define themselves by the roles that they have held so far, helping them to think outside of that and to understand how their innate strengths and their learnt skills might be able to be transferred into new careers, and looking at the options that they have ahead of them. The expand space is very much somewhere where we've been operating primarily up until this point in time. So actually building the skills, how can we help people to learn the skills they need to move into new roles? And that's still, of course, just as relevant. The experience space was around how can we help people to test out new types of careers. So might there be virtual ways to do that, but also in-person ways through apprenticeships, etc. And then empower was around how can we help people to feed into community networks, to share their experiences, to help one another to learn from the journeys that they've been on, and essentially to feed back to others who might be coming through a similar journey themselves. So by creating these 4 solution spaces and this call to action, we were really saying, both across Accenture and our partner networks, we need to now start to create projects to respond to the fact we see these changes in work coming. And in doing so, we were also looking to build out that ecosystem of partners. So we were working, a lot of our partner networks at that point in time were focused on helping individuals to get first jobs. And here we were looking at those individuals already in work and needing to transition. So that was a new space and looking for additional partners to come into that. And we were very much placing innovation at the heart as well. So we had a launch pad that helped you initiate new ideas through design thinking and practices, and then also test and prototype some of those ideas, which then led through into projects that have now come into fruition, which we'll touch on in the next slide. I guess the first thing, or just before we go into the next slide, another thing to say is that when we published this research, when we initiated this call to action, we were very much focused on digital transformation and those impacts. What we see now with COVID-19 is this is still just as relevant, but we're expanding the group of people that we need to support through these solutions. So not just those who are likely to be impacted by digital transformation, but of course those, including those in more human-to-human roles that might have been protected to a certain extent from the digital transformation. Also now, of course, needing help in transitioning potentially into new roles as well. So if we move on to the next slide, thank you. So we've had many different projects across the globe that that have come up as a result of the Inclusive Future of Work call to action, and I wanted to spotlight 3 here as examples of different types of intervention. So the one in the US, Shape the Debate activations, is around very localized research using analytics to understand within a particular region which industries and which job occupations are most likely to be increasing and in decline, to gather together members of the local ecosystem, including local NGOs and governments and employers, to talk about those changes and to initiate new projects coming off the back of that. So those sessions have taken place in many cities across America, and I think the image here is from a session that took place in Tampa, and another one to call out might be the Washington DC one, where the mayor of DC was a keynote speaker at that session, hosted that session. So really kind of bringing in key players in the region to think about how there could be real actionable activity within those spaces to respond to the challenge. In the UK, there was a project initiated that was very much focused on that envision space that I spoke about. So really helping people to think in the first instance about their innate strengths and talents. So when they start to look for a new role, not just to do that based on how they might have defined themselves in the past or up to that point, not just looking at their learned skills so far, but thinking about as a person, what kind of strengths might they bring to a role, and what are they most likely to be to enjoy and be successful at. So the Career Navigator project was with a startup social enterprise called Stay Nimble, and we've worked with them to develop the platform that they had already released. We've designed responsible AI to essentially create the algorithm to provide that matching for the users, and that is now being used both through partners and directly in B2C channels, so that individuals can find new careers, and as I say, from a strengths-based perspective, but then also overlaying skills and pointing towards learning that can help them to close skills gaps. And then the last example here is very much focused on that expand learning space. So this is a project that was initiated in Spain. The content's available in Spanish, French, Portuguese and English, but it's around helping people to develop skills that will be used to work alongside new technologies or emerging technologies. So how can people start to learn those skills that will be needed to augment and create and develop these technologies in future, and providing people with personalized learning journeys to move into that space. So yeah, bringing, as I said, new partners from across the ecosystem into these projects and into these conversations so that we could really try and scale solutions and get those out to the people that need them. So moving then on to the final slide. So this is really around reflecting on what have we needed to, or what have some of the interventions been as a result of the coronavirus, and how have we shifted some of our corporate citizenship programs, given what's been going on in the last 2 or 3 months. So the projects that we already had underway in the Inclusive Future of Workspace are relevant to those who are being impacted by coronavirus, and really we're looking at short, sharp ways to help to get those out to more people. In addition to that, we have this accelerator program for new ideas that are coming up across our company of over 500,000 people. So there had been a lot of natural response across the organisation to what was happening in all of the local geographies. So we wanted to bring that together in an innovation network that could help those individuals and those project teams benefit from shared connections, upskilling and resources. So we created 3 themes here around respond, recover and rebuild. So there were kind of very kind of short, sharp initial responses around access to food and healthcare in the respond space. Activity around helping organisations to shift towards more virtual ways of working, particularly from our perspective with NGOs, also helping with distance learning, both for school-aged children, and then also trying to get learning out to those individuals who are looking to move into their first job or navigate career transitions. And then finally, in the rebuild space, thinking about those sustainable future career paths in the employment and entrepreneurship space, looking for opportunities really to engage further there. I'm thinking about some of what we've heard so far and some of the principles as well. This upskilling piece brings in the consequencing pieces around thinking about the extended social and environmental impacts of any decisions that are being made on a project, and thinking about that responsible innovation side of things as we design new concepts. So I think, as I hear, this morning as well, when we were talking about the principles as well, I can see, those principles imbued across the structure that we have here. And so it's really great to see the 2 connecting. And so I want just to leave it with one final example of a project that we've recently initiated. We've recently partnered with an NGO in the US called New Profit, and they are creating a cohort of expert frontline workers that will provide services to innovation challenges. So they will be providing services to the XPRIZE Innovation Challenge on the future of work, and also MIT Solves Innovation Challenge on the same space. So by creating this cohort of individuals who the innovation challenges are looking to support, we're really helping to bring in that human-centered design into the innovation challenges themselves. So our role there is in helping to surface insights from that group of individuals, helping to package up how best to use that human-centered voice in future innovation challenges. And again, I think that ties in nicely with the principles that are being released today. So thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Sorry, muted. Thank you, Jessica. If there's any questions, I don't see questions yet, but if you have any questions for Jessica, please feel free to send to everyone or to Jessica privately the question, and she can respond.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Via the chat. With that, I would like to get to Sonja van Lieshout from Randstad, Global Public Affairs Manager at Randstad, who will share with us a collaboration that the HR services industry has or an alliance that they have established to address some challenges around COVID and work. Sonja, over to you. Can you?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
Thanks, David.
You're welcome.
Yeah, basically, McKinsey wrote an article, that was the start of all of it. And McKinsey wrote an article on safeguarding our lives and livelihoods. And after publishing that article, McKinsey in the Netherlands connected with our CEO, Jacques van der Broek, and said to us, you know, you are in the midst of the labor market, you are connected with the employees, you are connected with the employees, being the talents, you have the connections with the central employer organizations and with the government. Isn't there anything you can do in order to, you know, during the pandemic phase, start already getting back to work in what will be the new normal? Now, our CEO is always fond of a big challenge, so he immediately said yes, and then also added to that answer, I can't do this alone. So I need my peer CEOs from the Adecco Group and from Manpower Group to be on board with this initiative. He instantly connected with them. They both said yes. And since then, mid-April, we have launched of what we call the Alliance, Safely Back to Work in the New Normal. Now, David, if you can move over to the next slide, that would be great. McKinsey has done the article, as said, on safeguarding our lives and livelihoods. And we all know, of course, that the COVID-19 virus will stay with us for a certain amount of time. There's no vaccine available yet. There's no medication. There's no cure available yet. So in the meantime, we have to adapt to what we call at the moment the new normal. And how do we do that? By safeguarding both our lives and safeguarding our livelihoods. So David, if you can move over to the next slide, that would be great. McKinsey has calculated a couple of scenarios. And of course, the most preferable ones are the ones where we have a V or a U shape, which are basically A3 and A4 scenario. It means that we have fallen off a cliff, but it also means that there's a rapid return, there's a rapid recovery of both economy as well as a rapid return to what we used to refer to the old normal. Most likely is scenario A1, where we see that what we like to call fall off a cliff, but climbing up a stairs. So we have decreased tremendously quickly, but there's only a slow recovery in terms of economy and returning back to our livelihoods as being in the old normal. David, if you can move over to the next slide, that would already be great. So we have a couple of examples available for you of how the labor market is being impacted by COVID-19. We already see a big difference between the US and Europe, not so much in terms of jobs being hit hard. In both markets, the low-paid jobs are being hit hardest at the moment, as well as the fact that the young people are being hit hard as well. But the difference between the US is that where in the US, the unemployment is already increasing at the moment. Europe, and if you can move over to the next slide, David. In Europe, we see that a lot of people are currently on a furlough scheme or even on a short-time working scheme. And those are the financial support being arranged for by the government, of course. So in Europe, we do see that there are a lot of jobs at risk. But we also see that at the moment, things are quite steadily moving to unemployment once we are in the recovery phase and once the support measures from the government will stop. So David, if you can move over to the next slide, and I think we already arranged for that. Yeah, exactly. That's that on the short term, there's a big risk for those people being the young people and being, yeah, basically in balance of, you know, doing both work as well as their studies. And we have already seen a lot of students losing their jobs in this age bracket, and they are being hit hard by the COVID-19 situation at the moment. David, if you can move over to the next slide. And we said that, you know, with the three big companies, Randstad, the Adecco Group and Manpower Group, we are a large part of the HR services industry, and we are uniquely positioned to help you guys. Health and safety protocols are the key answer to get back to what will be the new normal, of course, to get back into the economic recovery phase. And we have said to each other, okay, we are here to help you. We are here to serve you because we are already used to these health and safety protocols. But let me get a few key facts first. On a yearly basis, with the entire HR services industry, we place over 58 million people in jobs across many sectors at the moment. We have also seen that from those 58 million people, a large part are agency workers. And 74% of those agency workers are 12 months after their initial assignment still in work. They are still moving on the labor market. So it also, you can also say that we act as some sort of a stepping stone. Now, one of the negative sides of the HR services industry, in a way, you could say, is that we feel the impact of an economic crisis as the very first ones, to be quite honest. The first ones are the agency workers to move out from employment, not to unemployment, but we retrain them and reskill them. In the Netherlands, for example, we have quite a good initiative where people were working at Schiphol, which is the airport in the Netherlands, big airport. All of a sudden there was no work to do for them anymore. So in only 1 week time, we retrained them, we reskilled them, becoming from an airport employee moving over to the logistics sector, because we have seen that a lot of people are needed in the logistics sector in order to sustain the pandemic phase, but also within the recovery phase. So David, if you can move over to the next slide, please. And here you see a bit of an example of the health and safety protocol I was referring to. We are in close contact both in the Netherlands as well as in Italy with the Minister of Economic Affairs. And we already heard quite soon in the process that, you know, we need protocols in order to facilitate companies, to facilitate industries to get back to work in the new normal, but do it in a healthy and safety mode. I mean, at first, the first point on the agenda is to protect the workers, whether they are flexible workers or permanent workers. But the first essence, the first important thing is to protect the health and safety of all of our workers. Now, we are already used to that as an HR services industry, because setting up health and safety protocols have been part of our job since the very first start of all of our businesses. And we took a close look at all those protocols and concluded there's very minor adjustment needed in order to make the health and safety protocols COVID-19 proof. Include the physical distancing, the social distancing, include the health and safety measures that are needed to sustain this pandemic phase. And that's what we have done. And we said to each other, okay, having this expertise, having this intelligence, we should make sure that we provide that to the market, to the governments, to the employers, to the employees as well, in order to ensure that that safe way back to work. David, if you can move over to the next slide, please. At very first instance, we said we're going to focus on 5 sectors alone. And that was at the very start of the pandemic phase. So we focused on transport and logistics, automotive, manufacturing and life science, construction and food. Now, we also said we are going to start within 10 countries, but rapidly, only 7 to 8 weeks later, we already increased to 25 countries. And you can see the countries on the slide. I'm not going to read them out loud. You can see them for yourselves. And basically what we do with the Alliance, if David, if you can move over to the next slide, and I think we are almost at the end then. Yes, we always call on everybody to be part of this alliance. It's not our alliance. It's basically an alliance that is there for everybody to join if you want to ensure a health and safety protocols to get back to work. Now, many companies have already, and especially the large one, have already said, yeah, but we already have our protocols in place. We also have available on all of the websites a scan where you can test if your protocol is really up to the COVID-19 standard in order to get back to that, to what will be the new normal. So thank you so much. And for more questions, I'm available, of course.
Thank you, Sonia. So here we looked at really some of these protocols we saw this morning. If you want to know more, contact Sonia. Or also, when we share the slides, you will see some more slides that are part of this pack to basically look at some of this information. I hope that Cristina is on the line, that her technology is working from Santander.
I'm here, Davide, thank you.
Okay, perfect. I'll hand over to you. And then, yeah, please, Cristina.
Hi, so I'm Cristina from Santander. I'm working in human resources and strategy, and I'm going to take you quickly through a strategic workforce planning and how we do this at Santander. So, as all of you know, in the recent years, we have seen drastic changes around customer behaviors, competitive landscape, and employee expectations. Obviously, digitalization has continued to play a crucial role behind all these changes and are impacting directly capabilities and the talent we need for the workforce of the future. So we have to take into account all these impacts if we want to continue remaining competitive as international players. So in this context, we must assess proactively how the workforce we need will look like in the future in terms of volume of people, but most important in terms of skills and the capabilities that our employees need to deploy and perform the jobs in a proper manner in the future. Could you please go to the next slide, David? Because I'm not sure if, thank you, thanks. So if we move to the next slide, how do we approach this at Santander? Our answer is a strategic workforce planning, which is an exercise that helps us to identify our future workforce needs in a systematic and very thoughtful way, measuring the gaps that we'll have in terms of resources as well as skills. And the ultimate goal is to define an action plan to tackle those gaps in an organic and responsible way. On this basis, we can ensure that we have the required capabilities in place in our organization to deliver our strategy, as well as the digital transformation, which is a core part of Santander long-term strategy. So as most of you know, Santander has presence in many different countries. So we have performed so far a strategic workforce planning in some of the units in the countries. So some of the common findings that we came up with is that the highest gap, obviously, that we're going to experience in the future is in digital positions, concretely in data and tech specialist profiles. Secondly, we're going to need like a lot of upskilling and reskilling, which is going to impact around 65–70% of the current workforce in order to adapt these employees to the new digital business environment. And the last thing that we found out is the attrition that must be managed in a very smartly and careful way to facilitate that reskilling needs, and also to retain the critical talent we have in the organization. Obviously, if we zoom in and we check the results at country level, the results obviously are quite different because countries are in different economic cycles, have different level of maturity. So where in UK, for example, the need of digital talent is more critical than in other countries. There is a battle as well to attract digital talent. In terms of attrition, the attrition is very high in countries as Mexico, Poland, Brazil, while in Spain it's really, really low. So we have even kind of forced that attrition to reach some healthy levels. So if we move to the next slide, Davide. Thank you. We have here like the high level methodology, the overview of the methodology to perform strategic workforce planning. So what we do first is you have to model the demand. For that, we consider different business growth drivers and some productivity considerations project that demand. Obviously, it's a strategic workforce planning. So our time horizon is between 3-5 years. The second thing is you have to calculate your supply. How do you do that? Using your historical attrition. So you will consider past attrition, retirements, internal mobility to be able to project that supply. And then you will find out, you will have a gap, which is calculated as the difference between the supply and the demand. So you will find out in what areas you may experience a shortage in workforce and where significant upskilling or reskilling will be required. And as I mentioned previously, when the exercise and the diagnostic is completed, you will have information that will fit your HR action plan. And you will develop different HR initiatives, different target topics such as recruiting, compensation, learning, performance, attrition management, internal mobility, and etc. So that's pretty much everything. And just to finalize, as business leader, we must act now because this change is happening now, but it's also accelerating. And in this context, in this environment, it's impossible not to accept and not to embrace the benefits of the new technologies and digitalization and reshape our workforce for the future. But we have to do that in a very responsible way. So we may not be able to protect jobs, because some of them are going to become redundant. We all know through innovation, but we can protect people. We can protect people by promoting adaptability, agility, and do upskilling or reskilling of our current employees. And the most important is start planning in advance for a dynamic future to accelerate transformation. So that's my message, and I don't know if you have any questions.
There are no questions yet, but I'll ask the audience again if they have any questions. I actually have a question I will send via chat, and we can get an answer there. Thank you, Christina. Very good point there, actually, that I was writing down about maybe we may not be able to protect all work, all jobs, but we definitely should and would like all to protect the people that work with us and for us, right? So that, I think, is a very nice message there. I would now like to go over to Mafalda from Sonai. Mafalda is the area manager, employer brand of Sonai MC, the retail arm of Sonai, and she will talk to us about Sonai's Flexit Up program. What is it all about, and what's been the impact of COVID? How has that changed any of your work?
Hi everyone, it's a great pleasure to be here again, presenting, as David was saying, our flexibility program that we implemented last year in our company. David, if you're kind to move to the first slide. To start by saying that at Sonai, we really believe that our people are a determining factor in our success. So that's why it's part of our values. Therefore, we are really focused in building a work environment where people feel good and they can grow personally and professionally. We believe that this is the only way we can retain talents, but it goes beyond that because we know that happy and fulfilled people work better, and that is a very valuable asset for any company. And of course, the external attraction is naturally added because our employees are our greatest ambassadors. But in order for this to happen and for people to be able to develop and be at their best, it's very important to really create the conditions for this to happen. This is why the well-being it's so important for us, and we try to be aware of the trends and really understand what our people needs. David. Looking externally, of course, it's no secret to anyone that flexibility is one of the most valued attributes nowadays, because we know that one of the main struggles of the workforce is the work-life balance. And we already know that today it impacts very positively the engagement when we talk about flexibility. Studies also prove us that it improves even the productivity and the quality of the workforce in terms of diversity and inclusion. And of course, it enhances the well-being because of that response we were talking about of the work-life balance. We also would like to share with you that one of the most interesting things we discovered when addressing flexibility is that we may have the tendency to think it's something that the youngest value the most, but the truth is that it has the same importance for all generations, and that makes flexibility even more relevant. Looking, of course, when we look inside, it's no different for us. At Sonai, we knew that people were also aiming for some flexibility in order to improve their lives. We know that to be able to talk about that and really present solutions to people, we have to know in depth what their experience, and listen to them and build solutions together. This is not one thing that the company does for the employees. It's something that we build together. Only this way we will be successful. And from our many surveys, we knew, it was clear for us that we had an opportunity here to improve our employee experience by giving our employees those tools and conditions to manage their work-life balance. Obviously, David, this is especially challenging in a company with such a diversity as the one we have of profiles, function, businesses, so people are facing different realities with different experiences. But even more when we are talking about the food retail, our main business, because it's a sector that you do not associate flexibility with due to the nature of all the functions it incorporates. And you can imagine the big challenge we have in hands to make sure that there is space for everyone really to feel good and valued inside our company. So that diversity and this challenge has not stopped us. It made us build solutions, let's say tailored solutions for the different needs we had inside, and for the work where we had the technology to enable and the tools to step forward. We knew we could implement very easily some measures that would strongly impact the professional and personal lives of our employees, and that's what we did. That's how our Flex It Up program was born, built hand in hand with our people, with our employees. It's based on a really philosophy of trust in which we give our people the necessary autonomy to be able to access these different flexible working solutions, allowing them to really feel they can manage their work-life balance. And of course, it has a very, very positive impact in the levels of satisfaction, of well-being and commitment. So here you can see the 5 initiatives that we launched with, so the remote work, the flexi work, which is a specific, more flexible hours. You have fixed period hours and some that you can decide, the extra days off, the part-time schedule, and the unpaid leave. We also would like to share with you that one of the things that we knew from the beginning was it was not enough just to launch the program. We knew that in order to be successful, we had to have the managers on board with us, really the leadership to sponsor this program. And this was the only way to really to implement a transformational change in the company. So what we did was we firstly launched to the managers with training sessions. We want them to feel safe and confident on this path, and this went very well, and we think this is one of the reasons of the success of the program. We also knew to be fast, we needed to be agile, because this was a need, a very present need. Sometimes I think I don't know if you relate with this, but we tend to wait for the perfect solution and to launch it. Let's wait, and that impacts a lot and delays a lot some important steps that as companies we should take. So we decided to move forward with what we have ready to use, made it very easy for everyone and simple to access, and this went really good. So we used the SharePoint platform already available at SANAI. It was a program which is very, very transparent, so people request access and managers are notified. If they do not approve the access, they have to justify it. Also, it was a database platform, so we could understand what were the needs here of people that were accessing to the program, and it was a monitorable platform also to give some assurance to the managers and also to make sure they could control their team works. The results were very good. You can move forward, David, thank you. With almost 50% of the eligible population using our program here, just a quick highlight of some indicators to stand out that most of the people who request access were women, generated from Generation X, which maybe it's not that obvious, and mainly non-managers. And of course, the most popular initiative, as expected, was the remote work. Next one, David, just to say that we cannot forget that we're talking about people, and more important than numbers, it's the impact we have in people's lives. So the stories that our employees shared with us made us confirm that we were really on the right track, and that we have taken a very, very important step. So from people who managed to be more present in their children's lives and their families' lives, to others who made dreams come true or spend time studying and developing themselves. Overall, the result is always the same. People more fulfilled and committed with the company. When the unexpected arrived, David, we were prepared. So when this COVID-19 arrived, we were prepared in a sense that we already had this cultural change. It had been achieved. So we sent 2,500 people home overnight. We had the tools for everything to work really smoothly. And here it's this acceleration that also helped us, because maybe some more skeptical leaders had to take the leap, and fears have been overcome because productivity was not affected, and we managed to guarantee the most important. So we kept people safe while really ensuring the business continuity, and it's incredible how in only 2 months we moved forward some years. Of course, the challenge that we also talked here was it's easier to send people home than bring them back, and that is also a challenge. But what happened and is still happening is challenging us now. It forces to go further and really rethink these flexibility initiatives, these programs in the light of this new reality, and that's what we will have now to understand. And just to finish, David, today more than ever we realize the future of work is now. And maybe moving to the final slide, please, David. And as I already said, more than flexibility policies or programs, we believe that the important thing is really to implement a culture of flexibility in the company. Only this way we will have an organization always ready to respond to the challenge that arises. And being flexible and able to adapt is what will allow us to thrive in a world that changes from day to day, from hour to hour. And we really, really insist on this. We really believe that if we master the skill of flexibility, of course, keeping people at the center, there will be surely no barrier to our successes. And thank you very much. Happy to answer to all your questions.
Thank you, Mafalda. With that, again, if there are any questions, please share them via the chat function or reach out to us after the meeting. And with that, I would like to hand over to Filippo.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Mafalda, and the colleagues for their perspective, including the life is now ending. It's always interesting read it and reflect on that. Thank you. We're going to hand over right away for the last part of the webinar to our colleagues Mel Mellis and Julie Zunker, representing Fujitsu and Microsoft respectively, to share with us their perspectives about the principles launched by the Council around people-centered technology transformation and their company's perspective, of course, around this issue. So Mel, without further ado, over to you, and then you will hand over directly to Julie. Mel.
Thanks very much, Filippo. And thank you, everyone. It's really interesting and inspiring insights today. So hopefully you can all hear me. And yeah, Davide, if you can go to the first slide, that would be perfect. Okay, so first of all, we can't really start without mentioning the very oppressive shadow of the pandemic and how it's changing our lives and our working lives. Combine that with the current industrial revolution, where technology and innovation are accelerating at this astonishing rate, where even with the best of intentions, and it was mentioned earlier, technology might have unintended consequences or inbuilt discrimination when designed and deployed. So with all of that together, we have a heady mix of uncertainty and anxiety. But of course, there is hope for something better when the new normal establishes itself, and how we negotiate this path and how we build the new future is our challenge, whether we're in private sector, in society, and of course, within governments. Like the SDGs and WBCSD's Vision 2050, no one entity or organization can achieve these necessary ambitions alone. Collaboration is key, and in these business principles for people-centered technology transformation for the future of work, we have jointly developed a great resource for organizations of any size to adopt or to use as an inspiration. So on WBCSD's Vision 2050 itself, the future of work sits as one of the foundation areas, and how we treat our employees and the people in our supply chains in whatever sector we deliver in is key to a sustainable future. And the overriding deliverables of Vision 2050 cover two impactful and memorable themes, and those are 9 billion plus people living well, but also within planetary boundaries. And I quote from one of the from the document that a future with inclusive workforces that are secure, motivated, skilled and prepared for any challenge that comes next, where people's lives are enriched by advancing technology, and where society can prosper from equal access to new opportunities. So, I mean, that's a kind of a baseline statement in there. Now, I fully recognize the principles are particularly scoped to explicitly cover the impact on employees and people in the supply chains, and not necessarily the aspects and the impact on society. However, it's hard to talk about the first two areas without incorporating some of that societal aspect. So I will drift there as part of this talk, so indulge me somewhat. So as some background, why were the principles formulated? So firstly, I refer back to what I mentioned earlier about the rapidly advancing technology such as automation and artificial intelligence. And for hundreds of years, technological innovation has yielded some anxiety and sometimes anger. The word sabotage has origins in the French for sabot, a cheap shoe hollowed out from a single block of wood, often worn by manual workers. And in the late 18th and 19th century, in the earlier Industrial Revolution, the French workers went on strike, and their noisy walking in their wooden shoes led to the term saboteurs. Similarly, across the Channel in England, the Luddites built a reputation, destroying the new machinery for textile work in fear that their skilled jobs were at risk from automation. And today the word Luddite is used as an insult. People wanting to destroy progress or considered so dulled by ignorance, they are unwilling to yield to the inevitability of technological advancement. But at the time, these radical movements were people with real concerns who were not communicated to or consulted, people who had families to feed, people who wanted to feel valued and didn't see alternative employment open to them. They felt obsolete even. And even though today there are worker protections and human rights legislation, it's not universal, especially in our supply chains. And employees are rarely consulted on systemic change or technology change. And the risk in the modern day is we have a gigantic population, which is predicted to rapidly increase to almost 10 billion by 2050. And can we glibly state that we are able to retain or retrain, create new jobs, create new valuable jobs, and have enough work people for all those people in the world to live well and within planetary boundaries? So regardless of the year, whether it's 1800, 2020, 2050, the anxieties for workers, the majority of them are the same. Automation and technology are a potential threat, especially in low-paid but key jobs. This is why, when we were in the early stages of our working group, we didn't want these principles to end up as a self-congratulatory checklist aimed at big corporations, but for everyone, whether directly employed or whether they're in our supply chains. And the COVID crisis shows that the industry can be disrupted, and it's delivered a near mortal blow to aviation, for example, but conversely other industries we have had to adapt, push agile technology plans forward, facilitating home or flexible working, and allowing more inclusive and diverse working patterns for many of our employees. So in terms of an audience for the principles, I mean, they can be aimed at anyone in an organization, but 4 key roles are suggested in the exec space. Firstly, the senior execs, they set the strategy and agenda for programs, of course. Secondly, technology leaders, CTOs, they guide the strategy, choose the technology and implement it. Thirdly, human resource leaders, they're absolutely responsible for hiring practices, job redesign, reskilling, upskilling and redeployment of employees. And also procurement leaders, there are potentially many thousands of silent voices in our supply chains. And finally, of course, we have to consider the employee representative groups themselves and employees, both directly employed and in the supply chain. Transparency and trust are key. They are the people most affected by change, and their voice and opinion should be a prerequisite of any program of technology change. So whatever services or products an organization provides to their customers, unless they define themselves by being a people company first and foremost, they will most likely fail. And in Fujitsu, we are proud to offer digital and innovation services to our customers, but it's people that underpin everything, and I'm sure it's the same for everyone on this call. Last month, we announced our purpose, and that's in the top left corner of this slide, to make the world more sustainable by building trust in society through innovation. And people are at the heart of our philosophy, whether it's employees or customers or any stakeholder, including within society. So I'm laboring the point, but it's about people first and foremost, and technology and innovation should be an enabler for that, not an inhibitor. Within Fujitsu, we talk about innovation being human-centric. That draws from 3 areas. The graphic on the right-hand side, there's a number of ecosystems around a central sphere, and within that sphere are the 3 areas, which are inclusivity, sustainability, and trust. All 3 of those criteria need to be met to deliver successful technology transformation and enable the various ecosystems. So on to the next slide, because I'm conscious I haven't even mentioned what the principles are, but to wrap up, and Julie will pick up more thoroughly on this point, I'm sure, but in the interest of time, it captures the 3 areas of what the principles are: respect, engage, and empower. So the first point, respect workers' human rights when developing and implementing new technology that impacts work. Secondly, engage workers in technology transformation. And finally, empower, so they can benefit from new technology now and in the future, and organizations can be future focused to support that. So I'll pause there. Obviously, I'm very happy to take questions. The documentation is available for download, and yeah, really keen to hear the next steps, and thank you very much. And yeah, Julie, our friend from Microsoft.
Thank you, Mel. Thanks for teeing it up. And actually, David, if you'll go back to the principles, 1 slide before this. Yeah, I think this is really good to anchor on. So thank you for the opportunity. My name is Julie Zunker, and I'm with Microsoft. And what I wanted to do is what most people have been doing on this call, and that is just some amazing best practices. We've all been thrown into something that we've never experienced before, and if nothing else, it's really shown our seams. And if we put people in the center of everything we do, which is exactly what these principles are designed to do, and apply the empathy and even proximity to what we're experiencing, I think the tools that you are being given through this body of work sponsored by WBCSD is just amazing. So just a couple of examples here that you may consider and take back to your own organization. So around respect. So as you know, Microsoft is a technology company. And a couple examples of where we're really thinking about the workers' human rights is around AI. So artificial intelligence. So about 2.5 years ago, we put together a committee really led by our CEO, Satya Nadella, called Ether. And it's a committee that focuses on AI, on ethics, and the effect or unintended consequences of artificial intelligence designed by engineering and research. So we also like to reference it as a sensitive use case committee. So if a customer is asking for an artificial intelligence type application, we have to look at it from every angle, not just selling something to a customer, but who's the end user? And will their human rights be impacted in any way? And these are things that we've never had to think of before. When we think about a sales transaction, whether it's business to consumer or business to business, I think historically we've thought of just a transaction and we've kind of signed a contract and moved forward. But we need to think about this all the way down to the very last person that artificial intelligence affects. So we look at the policies, we look at the practices and all considerations, and we turn down business. Because if it looks like we're going to harm somebody in the end, we absolutely are not respecting the individual. From a human rights perspective, we also believe that we conduct human rights assessments based on the partners that we do business with to ensure that there's no harm done and make sure that all issues and activities are tracked and that we are governing ourselves. From an engagement perspective, this is all about, for me, thinking about the products that we build. And this whole digital transformation, we've certainly seen the seams come through once we were all pretty much sent home to work in March. Did your company have a technology plan? For the Department of Defense, they did not. We had to move 250,000 employees of the Department of Defense over to our product teams in less than 3 weeks to equip them. Think of the experiences of all the students that all of a sudden went home. Did they have laptops? Did teachers even know how to actually instruct over a digital modem or model, just like we're doing today? Think of all of the productivity that was lost in that transformation. So we're now, I think everyone's catching up. Some were really, really prepared and others were caught. Many businesses, many universities actually kept thinking, oh, I'll push that budget out. I'll push that budget out. I won't make that investment. And now think of the impact to the person in the center, whether it's a student, a teacher, a healthcare worker, any employee. So we really need to think about building products that are quickly available and that address accessibility. We are definitely tracking through our Chief Accessibility Officer the impact that we never thought a COVID or a pandemic where we've all been sent home. Mental health is a big component of that. So we're really looking at, and we do this, we're committed to human-centered design principles where we build products for a continuum. So perhaps I'm carrying a child and I need to get into my car or pop the trunk. Maybe my arm is in a cast because I broke it. Maybe I don't have an arm. So as we build technology, we're always thinking about the transformation for that person and how it affects the workforce. Another product would be Seeing AI. So thinking about somebody with a disability such as no vision. How is it that we build technology that really thinks about catering to somebody who has that disability? And then finally, empowerment. And I think that has been the theme throughout this entire call. Putting the person, the employee at the center of everything we do. Culture is something that we knew, our CEO discovered very quickly, that if you don't have a strong culture and your employees aren't empowered, it does not matter what you deliver to your customer. That is the most important thing. So we've learned that in order for us to help customers digitally transform, we first need to have an actual cultural transformation. We have based our company's culture on the growth mindset. I highly recommend the book by Carolyn Dweck. She's out of Stanford. The growth mindset focuses on, do you have a closed mindset or a growth mindset? And this doesn't just apply to all of us as employees, but it applies to us as friends, as those that serve on boards, those that are parenting, etc. So I definitely would add that to your summer reading list. Trust is paramount, and that means thinking about it from a privacy perspective, a cybersecurity perspective, and a responsible to an AI perspective. These are enablers that we consider for inclusion. And then finally, two other points I wanted to raise from empowerment, and that is, are you giving employees the opportunity to give based on what's important to them? We have a giving campaign that Bill Gates started over 30 years ago. In just 2019, employees donated over $181 million to organizations that were important to them, not what was important to Microsoft as a company. We also recognize volunteer hours. There were over 850,000 volunteer hours around the world, and we matched those hours with money. So the empowerment of people to give in a way, whether it's time, it's money, or treasure, we like to say, or even talent, right? And that's what volunteering is all about. And to the Flex program that we just saw, which I was so intrigued by, again, back to this whole idea that we're now working in a different way. Microsoft just announced that any employee who has a child that's 12 years old or younger can get a paid leave of absence for 3 months. We're really trying to accommodate this change in how people are working and figure out, giving people the time to be at home, to probably be homeschooling, or think about what happens in the fall and spend that time really getting organized. So that we're not caught off guard again. So these are just examples of where one company, and you're hearing amazing examples from so many companies today, but just one company, a technology company, has considered how important these business principles are and how we're adopting them within our own corporation. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'll turn it back to Filippo.
Thank you, Julie. Fantastic perspective. And thank you also for the reading recommendation, but also for in particular, your angle around culture, company culture, and how that actually interlinkages with some of the topics we have discussed today. How do you build it in not only in the time of crisis, but how do you rely on it to drive some of these transformations? So thank you, Julie. Thank you, of course, Mel, along the way, not only for your constant support, but also with the Fujitsu view. And great to have you both interact around these principles. Look, as I often say, we're on Swiss time and it's 33, so we're 3 minutes past. I just want to wrap up very, very briefly with a couple of slides, sort of with next steps, or just indications of where information sits with regard to the future of work project and activities, of whom you heard now 8 members today who are shaping actively this project. You can find via futureofwork.wbcsd.org all of the information. You can find a lot more background, a lot more research, but of course the principles themselves as well. But also I strongly recommend you to look at that middle piece with the member solutions, the particular deep dives, the case studies that David and the team have worked on to really look at the future of work from particular angles. So strongly recommended there. And then last slide is basically to indicate to you that we will be sharing the recording and the slide package of the sessions of today. We will sort of assemble them and share them with all of you, but also indicate to you, of course, with the COVID-19 context and then the crisis that the pandemic has engendered, a lot of information, a lot of interesting initiatives, solutions being driven, including by leveraging strong technology platforms and strong technology solutions initiatives that are featured on the WBCSD platform around COVID-19. You're more than welcome if your company is not online yet with the information it has developed, with the activities it has developed. Please do not hesitate to reach out. We have over 120 examples featured, but we'll continue to feed, of course, the platform. And feel free also, certainly, to submit information around business practices, in particular on the topic of employee health and business recovery. Always welcome to hear from you, always welcoming ideas, thoughts, and inputs to shape the collective approach through and with WBCSD, the members and the partners. David, a very last slide, as usual, with the thank you. So thank you, of course, to all of you speakers, 8 speakers today, and 6, I believe it was this morning, some overlapping, so thank you even more to those who did the double shift. We very much appreciate your time, your efforts, but also your willingness to contribute, to shape the work of WBCSD going forward. Thank you, of course, to all of you in the audience who have been attending the session today, and also, of course, earlier today. It's always a pleasure to interact with all of you. And thank you, of course, to the team, Davide, Natalie, and the events team who have shaped this particular 90 minutes. We look forward to hearing from you and to staying in touch. And please don't hesitate to visit the website for more of these sessions coming up in the agenda all the way throughout the European summer. So thank you again, and wishing you all a good day, evening, or night, depending on where you are. And we will be in touch again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.